Welcome back to another episode of DreadHallowsTV. This time I have 3 stories about paranormal activities. Sit back and relax. I promise you that it's going to be intense. Story 1. It was a moonless night, the kind that makes you question whether the world beyond your headlights even exists. John, an adventurous soul with a penchant for thrill-seeking, found himself at a crossroads. The dark, winding road ahead was known locally as Devil's Pass, a name earned from its eerie reputation. John's friends had dared him to drive through Devil's Pass at the stroke of midnight. Superstitions abounded, tales of ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable accidents haunted the road's history. With his friends' jeers echoing in his ears, John made the fateful decision to accept the challenge. As John's car entered Devil's Pass, an oppressive silence enveloped him. The dense forest pressed in from both sides, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The only illumination came from his headlights, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance in the periphery. The road twisted and turned, a serpentine path through the heart of darkness. John's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He couldn't shake the feeling that something otherworldly was watching, waiting for him to let his guard down. As the minutes ticked by, John's unease deepened. Strange sounds like whispers on the wind filled the cabin of his car. He glanced in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see a ghostly figure in the back seat. The road ahead suddenly seemed to stretch on forever, an endless corridor of darkness. John's headlights revealed little more than an empty void, a claustrophobic expanse of trees and shadows. Then, he saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision. He slammed on the brakes, heart in his throat, but there was nothing there. Just the oppressive darkness of the forest. Doubt gnawed at John's resolve, but he pressed on. His friends' dares echoed in his mind, urging him to continue. He told himself that it was all in his head, that Devil's Pass was just a road like any other. But then he saw her, a young woman standing by the roadside. Her pale dress and disheveled hair billowed in the wind. John hesitated, his foot hovering over the gas pedal. It was a desolate place to hitchhike, and he felt an overwhelming urge to help. He rolled down the window and asked if she needed a ride. The woman turned toward him, her face a mask of sorrow. She nodded silently and climbed into the back seat, leaving a chilling, damp coldness in her wake. The woman in the back seat introduced herself as Emily. Her voice was soft and tremulous, and she spoke of being lost in the woods, searching for something she couldn't quite remember. John tried to reassure her, his unease growing with each passing mile. As they conversed, Emily's words took a strange turn. She spoke of things she shouldn't have known, details about John's life, his fears, and the dare his friends had issued. Panic set in as John realized that Emily was privy to his innermost thoughts. Desperation clawed at him. He needed to get out of Devil's Pass, away from this unsettling passenger. But when he looked in the rearview mirror, Emily's reflection was gone. The back seat was empty. John slammed on the brakes again, his heart racing. He scanned the car, but Emily was nowhere to be found. His breaths came fast and shallow as he stumbled out of the car and into the dark woods. He called out for her, his voice echoing through the trees, but there was no response. Panic surged within him as he realized he was alone in the oppressive darkness of Devil's Pass. Hours passed, and John continued to search for Emily in the blackness of the forest. The night was filled with eerie sounds, whispers, rustling leaves, and distant laughter that sent shivers down his spine. Suddenly he heard her voice, a haunting melody that seemed to come from all directions. Emily's disembodied voice taunted him, speaking of dark secrets and forgotten sins. John's sanity began to unravel as he stumbled deeper into the forest, desperate to escape the supernatural terror that surrounded him. As the night wore on, John's strength waned. He felt a presence closing in, an otherworldly force that sought to claim him. He recalled the stories of Devil's Pass, the tales of those who had vanished without a trace. With his last ounce of strength, John stumbled onto the road once more. His car stood where he had left it, the engine still running. He climbed inside and sped away from Devil's Pass, leaving the haunting forest behind. John's friends never believed his tale of that fateful night. They dismissed it as a figment of his imagination, a story to cover his fear. But John knew the truth. To this day, he is haunted by the memory of Emily's voice, by the supernatural presence that lurked in the darkness of Devil's Pass. He is forever changed, forever marked by the night drive that led him to the edge of the supernatural. Story 2. In the small, remote town of Blackwood, there was a legend that sent shivers down the spines of locals, the tale of Spectral Highway. This desolate stretch of road was said to be haunted, a place where the spirits of the restless dead roamed at night. Jake, a young thrill-seeker with a fearless reputation, couldn't resist a dare. One evening, his friends challenged him to drive the entirety of Spectral Highway alone, from the town's entrance to the other side. The dare was simple: make the journey and return unscathed. With a cocky grin, Jake accepted the challenge. Little did he know that the road he was about to traverse held secrets darker than his wildest imagination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Blackwood into darkness, Jake revved up his car's engine. His friends watched with a mix of excitement and trepidation as he headed toward the entrance of Spectral Highway. The road was shrouded in an eerie silence, and the air was thick with an inexplicable chill. The highway was like a tunnel through the dense forest, a path into the unknown. Jake's headlights cut through the darkness as he ventured deeper into the heart of the legend. The further Jake drove, the more the atmosphere grew oppressive. Strange, ghostly shapes flitted at the edges of his vision, just beyond the reach of his headlights. The road itself seemed to undulate, as if it were a living, breathing entity. Jake's pulse quickened, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that spectral eyes followed his every move. But he pressed on, determined to conquer the legend. As Jake continued down Spectral Highway, he noticed a figure standing by the roadside, a young woman with long, disheveled hair and a white dress that billowed in the wind. Her thumb was outstretched in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker in need of a ride. A sense of unease washed over Jake. He'd heard stories of phantom hitchhikers on this road, lost souls seeking a ride to the afterlife. He hesitated for a moment, then, against his better judgment, rolled down the window and asked if she needed help. The woman climbed into the passenger seat, her cold presence sending a shiver down Jake's spine. She introduced herself as Eliza, her voice soft and distant. Jake couldn't help but notice her pallid complexion and vacant, haunting eyes. As they drove, Eliza's conversation grew increasingly unsettling. She spoke of things that no stranger should have known, details about Jake's childhood, secrets he had never shared. It was as if she had a window into his soul. Fear clawed at Jake as he realized that Eliza wasn't what she seemed. He glanced at her, and his blood ran cold. The woman in the passenger seat had become a shadowy figure, her features shifting and morphing. In a panic, Jake swerved to the side of the road, slammed on the brakes, and flung open the car door. But when he turned to look back at the passenger seat, it was empty. Eliza had vanished without a trace. Jake's heart raced as he stepped out of the car and into the chilling darkness of Spectral Highway. He called out for Eliza, but there was no response, only an unsettling silence that seemed to stretch on forever. The road itself had transformed, its asphalt now a shifting, ethereal substance that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Jake felt a presence closing in, a malevolent force that sought to claim him. Desperation and fear drove him to run down the haunted highway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He had to escape, to find his way back to the safety of Blackwood, but the road seemed to stretch on endlessly, its eerie twists and turns leading him deeper into the unknown. As the night wore on, Jake's energy waned, and he felt a supernatural presence drawing closer. Strange apparitions materialized along the road, their ethereal forms reaching out to him. They spoke of forgotten tragedies, of souls trapped in an eternal torment. Jake couldn't escape the feeling that the spirits of the highway were trying to warn him, to share their stories of despair and loss. But the malevolent force that pursued him grew stronger, its presence pressing in on all sides. Jake's breath came in ragged gasps as he continued to run down Spectral Highway. He knew he couldn't outrun the malevolent entity that pursued him, that he was trapped in a nightmarish world of the supernatural. With each step, the road seemed to shift and twist, and Jake felt himself being drawn deeper into the paranormal realm. The spirit's warnings grew more urgent, and he realized that he had become a part of the highway's haunting tapestry. As the first light of dawn broke on the horizon, Jake found himself back at the entrance of Spectral Highway. He was disheveled, exhausted, and haunted by the night's supernatural terrors. The malevolent entity had released its grip on him, but the memory of the night would stay with him forever. Jake returned to Blackwood, his friends waiting with bated breath. He tried to recount his harrowing journey down Spectral Highway, but the words fell short of conveying the sheer terror he had experienced. To this day, Jake is plagued by nightmares of that night, of the haunting highway and the malevolent entity that pursued him. The legend of Spectral Highway continues to cast a shadow over the town of Blackwood, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead is blurred, and where the supernatural lurks in the darkness. Story 3. In the remote town of Ravenswood, a sense of isolation hung in the air like a heavy fog. Emily, a young woman with a troubled past, found herself trapped in this desolate place, haunted by memories she couldn't escape. The isolation of Ravenswood seemed to amplify her sense of despair. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the town slipped into a darkness that felt almost tangible, Emily made a decision born out of desperation. She would embark on a solitary drive down the long-abandoned and supposedly cursed road known as Desolation Highway. She believed that facing the road's ominous legends might somehow free her from the chains of her own past. Emily's car rolled onto Desolation Highway, its tires crunching on gravel that hadn't seen traffic in years. The road was flanked by gnarled trees that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers, their branches intertwined overhead to form a tunnel of shadows. The only light came from Emily's headlights, casting eerie shapes on the road ahead. Her heart pounded with a mix of trepidation and determination. She knew the legends, the tales of unexplained disappearances, spectral apparitions, and the oppressive silence that seemed to weigh on those who dared to traverse the forsaken road. As Emily drove deeper into the darkness, an overwhelming silence enveloped her. It was as if the very air had been drained of sound, leaving only the rhythmic hum of her car's engine. Even the wind, which should have rustled the leaves and whispered through the trees, was eerily absent. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, its twists and turns disorienting in the oppressive darkness. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the shadows. As the minutes passed, Emily's unease grew. She began to hear faint whispers, like ethereal voices just beyond the edge of her perception. Her breath quickened, and she glanced nervously in her rearview mirror, half expecting to see a ghostly figure in the back seat. Then she saw it, a figure standing by the roadside, partially hidden in the shadows. It was a woman, her hair disheveled and her clothing tattered. Emily hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding, before rolling down the window and asking if the woman needed help. The woman climbed into the passenger seat, her presence sending a chill through the car. She introduced herself as Sarah, her voice soft and haunting. Emily couldn't help but notice the woman's hollow eyes and a sense of sorrow that seemed to radiate from her. As they continued down Desolation Highway, Sarah began to speak in riddles. She talked of lost memories and the weight of guilt, of a past that could never be undone. Emily listened, her curiosity mingling with a growing sense of unease. Sarah's words took a strange turn. She spoke of secrets that Emily had never shared, details about her own life that should have been impossible for a stranger to know. Panic welled up within Emily as she realized that Sarah was privy to her most intimate thoughts and fears. Desperation gripped Emily, and she turned to look at Sarah, but the woman had vanished from the passenger seat, leaving only an unsettling coldness in her wake. Emily slammed on the brakes, her heart racing as she scanned the car. There was no sign of Sarah, no trace of the mysterious hitchhiker who had seemed so real just moments before. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air. Emily stepped out of the car, trembling with fear and confusion. She called out for Sarah, her voice echoing through the silent darkness of Desolation Highway. But there was no response, only the oppressive quiet that seemed to press in from all sides. Hours passed as Emily searched for any sign of Sarah along the desolate road. The night was filled with strange sounds, whispers that seemed to come from the very trees, distant laughter that sent shivers down her spine, and eerie shadows that danced at the edge of her vision. Emily felt a presence drawing closer, a malevolent force that seemed to toy with her. She began to suspect that Desolation Highway was not merely haunted but cursed, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead were blurred. As the night wore on, Emily's fear and exhaustion reached a breaking point. She stumbled onto the road once more, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. The malevolent presence closed in, its spectral fingers brushing against her skin. She heard voices, whispers of the restless dead, stories of tragedy and torment. Emily realized that the road itself was a conduit for the spirits of those who had perished here, their souls forever bound to Desolation Highway. As the first light of dawn broke on the horizon, Emily found herself back at the entrance of Desolation Highway. She was disheveled, drained, and haunted by the night's paranormal terrors. The curse of the road had released its hold on her, but the memory of the night would stay with her forever. Emily returned to Ravenswood, but no one believed her tale of that fateful drive down Desolation Highway. They dismissed it as a product of her imagination, a story to explain away her own inner demons. But Emily knew the truth. To this day, she is plagued by the memory of Sarah's cryptic words and the malevolent force that lurked on the cursed road. Desolation Highway continues to cast a long, foreboding shadow over Ravenswood, a place where the living and the dead are forever entwined, and where the supernatural hides in the silence of the night. Thank you for listening. For more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel.